John Scharf spent his life protecting wildlife habitat and enjoying all that it offered. He was fortunate that it was his passion, and he got to do it for a living. John said, "I love my work. I got to rub shoulders with some of the giants in my field. They fought lonely battles in the beginning, and they won. Sportsmen owe a lot to them." Ever humble, he didn't realize he spoke of himself. But ask anyone who watched this 34-year career with the DNR, and they will tell you John Scharf himself was one of those giants in the field. He began his career in Stevens County as the first professionally trained wildlife manager in the area. John purchased wetlands for the state in Stevens, Grant, Traverse, and Big Stone counties. The first was the Chicago Wildlife Management Area in Stevens Township, which he acquired shortly after coming to Stevens County in 1959. During his career, he acquired 64 wildlife management areas. Scharf began coming to Chicago as a youth in the 1930s and experienced this geographical area known to be well suited for wildlife habitat. Scharf made his home in this rural habitat of Stevens County for 39 years. He began his life in Minneapolis, Minnesota, born on October 30th, 1929, to Al and Ethel Scharf. He grew up in a home on Nicollet Avenue with two older sisters, Kay and Eileen. The family early on instilled an interest in the outdoors, spending summer vacation at Blue Lake near Zimmerman. They enjoyed hunting trips as well as canoe trips to the boundary waters of northern Minnesota. His course was set. He was hooked on being an active participant in conserving, preserving, and enjoying all that Minnesota offered in recreational and sportsman pursuits. After graduation from Washburn High School in 1948, John attended the University of Minnesota, obtaining a degree in wildlife management in 1952. He then enlisted in the U.S. Navy and became a weatherman stationed in Japan from 1954 to 1956. Following his discharge, John completed a master's degree at the University of Minnesota. His training with the DNR began in Slayton, Minnesota. Then he proceeded as assistant manager at Fergus Falls until his move to Morris in 1959. Believing himself to be not the marrying kind, soon after arriving in Morris, he noticed a new professional in the Stevens County Extension Office who started in July of 1960. The courtship took less than a year, with the first date in March of 1961 and the wedding of John Scharf, 33, and Mary Ann Sieber, 23, held in Franklin, Minnesota on December 16, 1961. Always scouting for new habitat areas, John had spotted an oak-covered hill near Wintermute Lake north of Morris. This location was the site of the Wadsworth Trail, where early settlers traveled across country in their wagons. Together, John and Mary Ann bought 12 acres, planted some more trees, and built a driveway right up the indent of the old trail. This became the location of their home, which they built in 1963. It was as carefully selected a site as any of the wildlife areas John chose. 2 children were born to the couple. Theodore, Ted, arrived May 9, 1964. 2 years later, Sarah was born on May 23, 1966. Ted married Lisa Schockenmeyer on September 2, 1989. John escorted daughter Sarah down the aisle on July 29, 1995, to marry Eric Annexted. Ted and Lisa had 2 children, completing the grandchildren phase for John and Mary Ann. Additionally, the family favored hunting dogs who were constant companions through the years. John loved the outdoors and marveled his whole life at the natural world. If family and friends didn't have an interest of their own, they were soon drawn into it by his passion and careful instruction. Mary Ann experienced her first ice fishing trip during their honeymoon in January of 1962. This was, of course, after a cultural portion of the trip enjoying the sights of Chicago. She engaged in canoe trips to Bootleg Lake. With their children, they enjoyed long annual weekends to read, observe nature, and enjoy campfire cooking. John shared his skills and knowledge about the natural world every day with his family, friends, and through his work. As a professional in natural resources, John authored many different articles on subjects of fishing, lures, pheasant habitat, and a very special one, I Taught My Son to Hunt. This article, written for the Minnesota Sportsman in 1979, spoke of how hunting, when done right, offers a father and son a heritage rich in tradition and fellowship. As a known expert at creating and preserving habitat, as a fisherman he had no equal. He ice fished, bass fished, muskie fished, walleye fished, pan fished, fly fished, and he knew the places to catch them. He had fishing buddies, some lifelong. Together, these fishermen would share their favorite spots, their campfires, and their memories. In 1980, Scharf authored Love Affair with Lake of the Woods for the Minnesota Fins and Feathers magazine. This had been a serious men's-only trip taken each year. In this article, he states there is a charm and attraction of this lake that a wife should not force a choice between. In 1979, John had taken Mary Ann along to Whitefish Bay to show her the other love of his life. He was astonished that by introducing new eyes to the place, the women found new enchantments, including buckets of fresh-picked blueberries made into blueberry cobbler and ancient Indian paintings on the cliffs above the water. He became skilled at making his own lures for fishing, both carved and tied. Blessed be the fishing buddy of John Scharf, for they will enjoy good locations and interesting handcrafted equipment.
And he made most of the lures in here. He and his friends would experiment. Both of these he used what he called the magic hour, the twilight hour, and that was between 8:30 and 9:30 in the summertime on the lake. And muskies that you had seen during the day might come back and follow these lures. He sold many of these. He only had an ad in a magazine twice, I think, and then they sold by word of mouth.
Lures were not the only handcrafted pieces carefully executed by his hands. He became a skilled artisan in fine wood building. Projects included a roll-top desk, chests, tables, all crafted from cherry wood and treasured by those he gifted them to.
Well, one of his favorite hobbies was woodworking, and he had a shop in the basement, and that's why we never finished off the basement, because he always said, what if I want to build a boat? But he built this desk for me when we added this family room onto our home. And it's made out of cherry, and it's aged, the color ages, and it's gotten much darker than it was when he made it. John took a lot of pride in things, especially the joints and the finish of a piece of wood. And when he got done with this, Sarah was visiting, and she was so impressed. And she wanted to know if her dad would make her one. And he said, oh, it was an awful lot of work. I think you better treat your mother very nicely so you inherit it.
Scharf spent close to 40 years during the 50-year period that Minnesota launched the Save the Wetlands program. After years in which draining wetlands was encouraged, the work began to reverse the depletion of wetlands. In 2001, during the state's honoring of the 50 golden honorees, the DNR recognized John Scharf as one of the 50. Minnesota, together with the Disciples of Wetland Conservation, had created more than 1 million acres of public hunting and recreational land.
Now for many average Minnesotans who don't have their own property or place to hunt, they can hunt on these wildlife management areas. And they're also a wonderful place for bird watchers, for photographers, for just getting away from the city, like my son says, and let the smell blow off. And many of them have been managed in different ways over the years, but they still stay in public ownership for people to enjoy.
Other awards had preceded this honor. John was the first member of the Herman Oddfellows Man of the Year recognition. WCCO Radio named him the Good Neighbor. Minnesota Pheasants Forever honored him at their 25th anniversary. Through all of these commendations, John himself said he was embarrassed for being honored for just doing my job. Never mind his own humility, his work had far-reaching impact. Farmers learned about setting aside acres and planting cover crops for habitats. His invention of the corn cube has become a habitat staple for wildlife conservationists. John himself expressed, "A wildlife manager can get pretty excited standing in a well-managed, set-aside acres." So he decided after retiring in 1990 that he would set up one final area, one of his own. In 1995, John and Mary Ann bought land in Sinnis Township, known to the locals as Boxcar Quarter. This was due to an old railroad car left on the property. When heart problems brought his life to an early end at the age of 69, on November 22, 1998, the 160-acre improvement area had not been completed to John's standards. The family knew exactly what he wanted and worked with the DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and local conservation groups to complete the area. John Scharf was a man who believed he had it all. A good wife, who you could affectionately call Maud. Great kids, one of each. Great grandchildren, one of each. A jar of peanut butter, saltines, and a big glass of milk. Good fishing, good hunting, and the great outdoors. A job he enjoyed that allowed him to work at what he loved. He enjoyed life and found himself thinking many times, "God, but it is great to be alive." In his own words, a perfect winter day was, build a roaring fire, put on a stack of symphonies, get a good book, a snifter of brandy, and top it all off with a good cigar. John's lifetime of work in Stevens County came full circle. The first wildlife area he acquired in 1959 was the Chicago Wildlife Management Area. On May 20th, 1999, the area was renamed and dedicated as the John A. Scharf Wildlife Management Area. The monument is just what he spent his life building, a monument of grass and water.